I was really excited for this reboot of Kickboxer, the film that really introduced the world to action superstar Jean-Claude Van Damme. And whilst I'm glad they've restarted this new franchise, they've already shot the second film with a third and fourth planned, there's elements of it that just didn't do it for me the way I'd hoped. We follow Kurt Sloan as he looks to avenge his brother's death at the hands of Tong Po, a brutal kickboxing champion, by defeating him in Mortal Combat! He is trained by Van Damme here, replacing the wizened old trainer of the first film. In the original, Kurt's brother was paralysed in the fight, but they've dialed it to 11 here. Vengeance has a more serious tone than the original, which for me takes away from it. It's a bit silly, but Van Damme's dance sequence in the first film is weirdly endearing, whilst here they push it to the end in a sort of, hey look, we can be fun too nod. They also go for the darker choice of actually killing the brother, instead of paralysing him. I understand why they did it, it does focus Kurt's mission, but it is a shame as you lose the relationship and emotional connection between the two.
I'll win that fight, for you and me.
Luckily, Van Damme returns, an actor who has clearly improved since the time of the original, and he brings a charm and a genuine warmth to his new character that really helps the film.
Splits. We have more to do.
His presence elevates things, with the montages he features heavily in especially coming off as genuine highlights. Which is good as, man, do you get a lot of montages. A character who disappointed me though was Bautista's Tong Po. Don't get me wrong, I think Bautista is great in the role, but save for the inciting incident fight and a few stare-down moments, Tong Po doesn't really do all that much until the ending. Yes, he kills the brother, but then for an hour he's just sort of there. I was happy to see that they removed Tong Po's use of sexual violence against a love interest, which happened in the original, as I'm strongly against that sort of thing as a simple plot device. But bringing Tong Po back to do something impactful before the final fight would have helped re-establish him as the cruel antagonistic force the story needs him to be. This would make Kurt's inevitable domination of him even more satisfying, and made much better use of someone as talented as Bautista. In a film like Creed, probably one of my favourite films over the last few years, we are constantly reminded throughout of what Adonis Creed must face. Pretty Ricky gets under his skin, is shown fighting throughout, and in the final fight has a very real chance of defeating Creed. Hell, Ricky actually wins the fight, though due to how Creed's character is developed, we still feel satisfied as he has completed his emotional journey. I want to use Creed as an example again based on how its final fight develops. In Creed, the two are fairly evenly matched throughout, with it never being quite clear who could win to the very end, though Ricky is definitely the most experienced fighter. Creed has a moment like in Kickboxer where he is knocked down, and is then brought back up after some quick, emotionally affecting flashbacks. But even after that, it is still an incredibly close fight. In Kickboxer, admittedly as it is in the original, Kurt is clearly the weaker opponent throughout the first part of the fight, with Tong Po easily knocking him around. However, once he stands up, he seemingly only now remembers the training Van Damme has given to him, and suddenly Tong Po is seemingly the weaker opponent. This was where the film could have improved on the original, but it's let down too by the editing. In the new film, it looked to me like they were cutting at times around the fact Bautista had to leave to shoot another film, thus requiring an obvious stuntman. It really affects what should be the grandstanding moment. This is a film called Kickboxer, so the kickboxing action should shine. And so then, why did they think adding in an incredibly limp sword fight would help? It exists pretty much just to set up how Kurt ends the fight, which sadly takes away from all that kickboxer training is done. Really, couldn't he have used his Muay Thai to defeat the final obstacle? It just makes sense, and this is how it was in the original. It is far more satisfying. Other fights do fare better, with this one coming off as decent, but then we get these weird cardboard cutout elephants they fight on top of. Having elephants might bring production value to your film, but if you can't afford to have the fights happen on top of them, don't bother doing it. What's happening between the fighters is decent, but my eye kept being drawn to the weirdness happening beneath them. It's a shame as Lionel Stovall, one of the best working fight choreographers today, seriously, I can't list his stuff, just IMDb him, he deserves so much more credit than he gets, was responsible for what was happening on set, which does look like it was put together very well. The sometimes obnoxious editing, though, takes away from that work. I feel that this may have been required due to budget constraints and issues on set, but come on, be creative. If you can't have Bautista, work around it. Maybe have it be revealed he was paid to kill the brother or something, and pit Kurt against the true killer. If you can't have a fight set on top of elephants, do something else. That said, as much as at times I could have done with a bit more fun and energy in the film, it's pretty good looking, and Van Damme brings a lot to it, so I can't say I'm unhappy I watched it. I just wish they'd been a bit more creative. and by doing so, the action could have been much more memorable. It's a pretty mindless watch, but when you have films like the Undisputed series doing a very similar thing to much better standards, it pays to stand out, especially if you want those already prepared sequels to succeed.